I'm Steve Sando, and welcome to Napa Citizen Round Table. Napa Citizen, just so if you don't know, was born out of my being a local business person and resident in the county, and absolutely frustrated learning how local politics works. And it's way out of my skill set, but I'm mad as hell, and I'd like to do everything I can to correct it. And one of those things is talking to people who are activists, who are more educated than myself, and I humbly would defer to them. So I'd like first you to meet them. Amber, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, my name is Dr. Amber Manfree. I'm a geographer. I study landscape change and I work on water issues a lot. I'm also a fifth generation Napan and I love Napa.
That's wonderful. And Kelly?
Hi, my name's Kellie Anderson. I'm a 30-year resident of Angwin. I actually moved here to work in the vineyard and wine grape industry. And over the last 30 years, I've become very aware of the deforestation of our hillsides and our natural landscapes for vineyard development. And I've become involved in the political and planning process of how that works. And I'd like to bring that to the attention of the average resident of Napa County, what's happening here in our watershed.
I don't think we have any clue. So we'll talk about those things. First, I want to talk about the county and how it operates. And we're going to talk about COVID for a little while because as a local business person, it's completely affected me. We've had to shut down our retail store, and we are really lucky that most of our business is direct to consumer via the internet. And we also sell to stores and restaurants. So our restaurant sales actually are only down 20%, which I don't quite understand, but I'm grateful for that. And our internet sales are through the roof. But to me, and tell me if I've got this wrong, at one point it was really clear the federal government failed us. They are not going to do anything. And this was really back in April that I noticed it, but I think the clues were there in March. We had the lockdown, and this is where I think I was just idiotic in assuming the county would take the lead, because when the Fed stopped, the state really stepped in, and the county's jobs was to execute the state's mandates. And I couldn't believe how milquetoast the response was from our supervisors. And in fact, I tried to talk to Dr. Reluccio. I couldn't get through. I was cut off by the PR person who said that you could submit some questions. I did that. I've still never heard definitely no, you can't do it. So this was in April. I also went to Brad Wagon Connect and CC'd all the board of supervisors. And no one ever got back to me. It's kind of shocking. And I'm probably bigger than most wineries, I'll be honest with you, with what we do. Not that that should make any difference, but I just want to talk about the response from the county is awful. When I finally got Wagon Connect on the phone a month later, we're going through why are you letting this COVID gallery? There was an art gallery that was trying to open illegally or against the mandate. I said, what are you doing? And we went on back and forth for about 15 minutes, and finally he said, Steve, what I hear you saying is we need to do better work on enforcement. I was like, yeah? Is that an issue? And then of course nothing happened. And they finally had an enforcement task force. I talked to someone on the city council who said that now the police wouldn't be enforcing this. And of course, my attitude is I didn't know the police mandate, what they're going to do. I thought, I don't think they get to pick and choose what they want to do. But anyway, is this typical, do you think, of the county? I mean, for me, it was shocking. Oh, we're not, oh, no, we're hands off. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I can compare it to the disaster response after the fires, which, it seemed like they hadn't really thought very much about what pieces you might need to have in place to respond to a disaster. And it's only more distressing that it's been 3 years almost since the fires and we didn't do any better with this. I know there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of people out there who want to help with disasters who are either somewhere in the response community or who are just citizens who will be willing to volunteer to help out with stuff. But someone has to coordinate and someone has to be thinking about, are there missing pieces in this setup that can help us be on top of it when something happens. And, you know, I get that Napa's economy rests heavily on visitation, and that's something that's very risky when you're talking about having a communicable disease, and you have people coming in from wherever to keep your economy going. As a resident, you know, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but as a resident watching this unfold, it just really seemed like, I mean, as in much of the country, there's so much concern over the economy, but what people don't understand is the more that you shut down and get things under control, the sooner the economy can really bounce back. 100%. And we have mismanaged this, you know, at every level. I don't know of a good example in the US where somebody's been, some location, the people there have been really on top of it and everything's hunky-dory, you know. So, you know, I think it's a little bit of a bigger issue of us as a society just not thinking ahead very well. And disaster preparedness is really important across the board, whether it's illnesses or fires, earthquakes, floods. We have all this different stuff that can happen. And you would hope the government would have more of a contingency plan in place, but I think we're seeing some holes.
And also, you think the local government would recognize, oh, wait, we're on our own here, or somewhat. And I'll tell you, we had a case at Rancho Gordo. We shut the whole company down until we could get testing done. And of course, now testing took a week to get an appointment and over 2 weeks to get the results. So really, there's no point to testing. No one from the county has ever called us to find out what was going on, like how they were exposed to other people. Nobody, zero from the county. And I know people that have volunteered to do tracing and they've never heard anything. There are people out there, like you say, wanting to help. I mean, that's human nature in a crisis to want to dig in. And one thing we can do is trace it. So I find it so frustrating. And then the lack of response from the county. And they do these, I don't know if they're still doing them, but they were doing press conferences with Diane Dillon, Berluccio, and the PR person. And they cherry pick the questions. There's no chance for follow through, and it was like I'm watching it and my blood is boiling. Also, Diane Dillon saying, oh no, the problem is, we've tried to warn you, the problem is you have your family gatherings. And it turns out really it's packed farm worker housing. It's a much more systemic problem. And yes, of course we should not be having backyard barbecues, but it's like, it was super frustrating them sort of blaming us. And it's like, and there's no tracing, so you don't even really know. And sorry, I'm going on, but it's like, and this is a snapshot of what happened 3 weeks ago, not what is happening now. So it's actually whatever results we're looking at were from 3 weeks ago. And we saw after the 4th of July, a huge, huge spike. And that's when we decided to close again after the 4th of July so we could make as much money from that weekend. So I rest my case. It's rough.
I do have another comment, but I want to give Kellie a chance to weigh in.
Well,
no, it's great.
You know, Steve, I have a very, very small vintage store in Calistoga. And my woke moment came, I think it was Sunday, March the 5th. And a couple walked in from Italy and they were almost in a panic. And they said, we have to fly back tomorrow. And I sort of shrugged and they say, don't you know what is happening? And there was real fear in their voices. And I went home and did more research than just Googling or Facebooking. And I said, wow, this is really happening. And I locked the door to my shop because you couldn't achieve any sort of social distance in that small space. And that was the end. You know, I'll make this story short. I had to close the store. And ultimately, the entire complex that I was in was closed down. And, you know, I still had the struggle of, I have a store full of inventory and I'm not coming back to this space. So I had to make really difficult decisions about what do I do with thousands of pieces of merchandise? And, you know, ultimately waited until the governor said it's okay for retail to be open again. We all put on our masks and had a huge sale. It was a very, very uncomfortable process for me, but I'm a one-woman show and I had to get out of there. So I know this is replicated by restaurants and hotels and wineries and many small businesses, more complex than mine. But to watching Dr. Reluccio and the supervisors and the health department making their presentations, I think what we're seeing is the whole thing's just unraveled. And my father used to say, God or the government, who is going to help you? And this looks like one of those situations where neither God or the government is going to help us. And we have to help ourselves and have empathy for other people. And if that is all they're asking is wearing your mask or not having this big party, it's mind blowing that folks would put their own economic well-being, above the health of our world. And yet I feel, because I was stuck in that position, I have a space I'm paying rent on, the whole place is locked down and it will not reopen again. And what am I going to do? So when World War II came, and I remember this because I'm old enough to have grandparents and great grandparents that were there, people had rationing coupons. They had to make sacrifices. Sugar, tires, a number of gasoline. These things just weren't available, and people had to make sacrifices for the better of our nation. And I don't see that happening here. I mean, I do see it. I do see people caring. I do see people volunteering. I see the food banks rolling in, but I see our county government, whose number one goal is flatten that curve so we can open the hotels again. Not flatten that curve so we'll save lives or keep people healthy. And that's my concern, is the economic goal. Is it an economic goal or is it a human goal? And I'll leave it at that.
Well, the weird thing, sorry, I know, Amber, I know you want to say something, but on one of these press conferences, you have Dr. Reluccio talking about the economy and Diane Dillon talking about mental health. And it's like, whoa, I really, those are the two people are talking about the wrong subjects. But I also would say, if they could just be upfront and just say you are on your own, but to sit there and say it's your fault because you had a barbecue and that's why this whole thing is out of control, or, oh, it's getting better, or we have to think of just be upfront. You're on your own. That would actually help us more. And I think since the Iraq war, where basically we can shop our way out of it, like, oh no, we can go to war and no one's going to suffer. A certain segment of the population believes there's no price to pay for doing certain things. And anyway, sorry, Amber, so I cut you off, but go ahead. You were going to say something.
As we're just all talking about it.
Yeah.
I talked to a nurse on it was at somebody's birthday party on Zoom, which we're all having these very strange birthdays. Anybody who's had a birthday since mid-March, it has not been a normal birthday.
No, and try turning 60
Oh,
being by yourself in your house. It's like, wait, this is a good milestone. But I'm sorry.
So I was on a Zoom birthday call. There happened to be a nurse on the call, and she was working in Sonoma County, setting up emergency shelters at Sonoma State University in the dorms for anybody, but particularly for homeless people, because there's a major homeless problem there. And it was really interesting hearing her talk. She was beside herself with how uncareful people were being and how focused we were on the economy, much like you're saying. So I'm mirroring that. And her comment, which I thought was so poignant, was that like Kellie says, yes, you can go through some hardship for the greater good. And the thing is, that sucks. It sucks to go through hardship.
Sure.
But you can get money again. You can't necessarily get your health back with a lot of the complications we're seeing with COVID, and you certainly can't get your life back or your loved ones back. And that is where I just feel like there's a major message, like there's this disconnect between the things that are possible to regain and the things that aren't. And and I think the real disaster here is that the government has been so uncoordinated, because they could be doing a lot more to support people, it seems. And I guess the other point I want to make is that one of the things I see as a scientist, and I'm an environmental scientist, usually I'm going to decision makers to talk about what are the components that make the environmental system work, right? But in this case, we're talking about what makes health work and what makes society work. And I do feel like there's a real issue with people in leadership roles not understanding how to listen to scientists, because a scientist who is reputable, who is upstanding in their field, they won't tell you what to do. they will inform you and teach you the information you need to make a good decision. But scientists don't make policy. That's not what we're trained in. Certainly we have ideas about it, but the role of a scientist in society, and I don't know, this is something that's kind of in flux. Sometimes people debate about it, but the role of a scientist in society really isn't to set the agenda. It's to inform the agenda and make sure that when it does get set, it's going in the right direction that takes all the important things into account. And, especially, there's been all kinds of stuff happening all over the country. But what I'm seeing is that the scientists really early on were like, you need mass testing, you need to do tracing, and you need to do social distancing. And those things have never changed. But the lack of incorporating those things in policy has really led to this uncontrolled kind of situation. And I just wonder, if leaders understand how to properly interpret the message from scientists in this case. Like Kellie said, wear your masks, people, because you are kind of on your own, it seems.
Well, it goes back to that. I think I can get something for nothing if I just, we'll print more money and then the budget will balance, or whatever it is. It's just, I have my agenda and I'm going to really cherry pick the information. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on, because I want to talk to you both also about environmental issues here. It seems like we've got a lot of new forests that seem to be being raised for vineyards. Is that the case? What's going on right now?
Well, I'll jump in on that and try to segue from your COVID topic. We were all initially advised to get outside and get some air, hopefully stay close to our homes, not drive to state parks and, overwhelm the resource. So locally, it's very clear that the Pacific Union College demonstration forest has been incredibly utilized by folks from Napa or who knows where to get out, because it's a wonderful, beautiful forest. But also the Linda Falls Land Trust Preserve, which is a much smaller natural resource, which has Con Creek and Linda Falls flowing through it, was completely overwhelmed. And there were dozens and dozens of cars constantly at the unmarked trailhead, folks with boom boxes, putting on their see and ski, their dogs on leashes, hauling down, their ice chests to what is, an undeveloped, wild waterfall. And the land trust had to close it down for access. There were no restrooms. There were people getting lost. What it speaks to is, though Napa County is perceived to have very little urban development, there is very little public open space that people can access. And we know now that that's one healthy thing we can do, is to try to get out and social distance and exercise. We lost Measure K, the recent 0.25% sales tax, to try to fund more open space. And so what is the disconnect with our elected officials, with voters, that they don't realize how important these watersheds and these open space areas are? Hopefully, if we have the opportunity to vote on that again, people will begin to see how important public, permanently preserved open space is.
And is there something up for grabs right now?
Well, there are always many, many places that are under imminent threat of development, whether or not those are available, or if there's a possibility of acquisition. Those are more complex questions, and Amber can speak to this. A site for acquisition is looked at for a lot of values, whether it's watershed, wildlife migration, groundwater recharge, recreation, individual plant or animal habitat. Or connectivity. There's a whole host of questions that go into acquiring permanent open space. But one thing we do know is that the constant checkerboard development through vineyards of our upland watersheds devalues the retained forest or natural landscape next to it. You degrade and deplete the remaining forest value if you're fencing next door, if you're spraying, if you're running frost protection, if you're pumping groundwater and you have workers in there. So even though there may be protected lands, for example, the Wild Lakes Land Trust Preserve, which is the largest, I believe, maybe not, preserved area, which stretches from Angwin all the way up to Robert Louis Stevenson State Park, 3,000 acres, has a vineyard going in immediately at its gate right now. So what we're doing with our current county policies is we're making preserved lands like a zoo. We're fencing in the preserved lands and say bears, bobcat, hyphal fungi, frog drip, all these natural processes. You're in this fenced off area and everything around you is in a holding pattern until a vineyard is proposed. And so we really do have a failed general plan. This is where it gets into the politics that nobody understands. And I'm no expert, but I've been doing it a while. Our county general plan designates all the headlands watersheds as a designation: agriculture, watershed, and open space. And in a nutshell, most of you don't picture agriculture and watershed and open space as the same function. Yet we've wrapped them into one, again, making natural landscapes only in a holding pattern until a development is proposed. And one of my solutions, though I don't know how it would play out, we would need experts in planning, is to bifurcate those, that certain lands are designated agriculture and others are designated watershed. And that requires the will of our elected officials to do something.
And let me just interrupt. Agriculture would include marketing now. So that when you say agriculture, does that mean they can open a tasting room and then maybe a restaurant and then actually, let's do a B&B? Because that's where I think it gets so, when people think agriculture, they're thinking cows on a pasture. They're not thinking a gift shop, right?
Right. And one of my favorite stories was the Davis Family Winery on Silverado Trail, the old Savier. They had a Kenny Loggins concert there. That was the biggest tent I've ever seen. And, the Fernells and the blue lights and the sky, was just an amazing concert. But they had a baccarat jewelry party where they hired these lovely, beautiful young models who were covered with emeralds and diamonds and rubies. And they, milled about the matrons, and the ladies that were in attendance for the brunch were able to pick, which particular piece of jewelry they wanted. And I say to you, what has that got to do with agriculture?
So Amber, do you want to give a comment to make about all this? I think you might.
I remember this event that was, I don't know, they just kind of slid it in at a certain winery on Silverado Trail, and they were selling, I forget, it was like Maseratis or something. And so they had brought a whole bunch of these extremely high-end cars to the winery, and people were test driving them. And I was driving down Soda Canyon Road that day and got passed by one of them. This person who doesn't even normally drive a car like that, zooming around on this remote mountain road. And I just remember getting down the road and just thinking, like, what has this place become? It's pretty out there. But I just want to say, I absolutely agree with Kelly. Open space is an environmental justice issue. Coming from a family where, we've been here a long time, that's the only reason we can afford to own what we have. And I really absolutely recognize that if you haven't been here for generations, or if you are not exceptionally wealthy, you just don't have a lot of access to open space in this county. And that's unbelievable, because like 2/3 of Napa County at least is very wild and very beautiful. And we just aren't really able to enjoy it. And that's a mental health issue. Certainly in the time of COVID, that's just an overall well-being kind of issue, because being in nature is restorative. And all we really have in the vicinity of the city of Napa is Skyline Park, which is perennially at risk of being taken away from us, unfortunately. Westwood Hills, which is not very big and is really right on the edge of the city. and up north a little ways, the next closest big wild thing is the Department of Fish and Wildlife reserve at Rector. And most people don't even know about that.
Right.
You know, it's not developed like a park. And, you know, unless I'm mistaken, I think those are pretty much the kinds of parks where you could go enjoy a wild space in the hills. And there's some access down in American Canyon to the marshes, which is great. You know, but again, it's not very much relative to the population we have and to the open space we have. And it's just such a head scratcher. But as far as what people can do about the development, the open space, and the access is, you know, it's really unfortunate Measure K didn't pass, but I think we just need to keep putting that on the ballot and keep voting for it. Sonoma County, when they voted in their open space district, the benefits of that have just been so apparent to people. When it first passed, it didn't pass by a very big margin. It needs 66%, I think, to pass because it's a financial endeavor. And but the longer the open space district has been there, it's been renewed twice now, and every time it renews by a bigger margin because people understand how meaningful it is to, you know, put your money where your goals are, and actually get a lot of access to open space for the community. So there's that. The city of Napa has taken a very weak stance on protecting its water supplies. The county permits all the development upstream of Condam and Milliken. The city doesn't really have much to say about the permitting process. What the city could be doing is it could be buying that land to make sure its water supplies are clean. And that's something that's really common for big cities to do. LA controls the Owens River Valley, absolutely. The city of San Francisco pretty much owns the whole Hetch Hetchy watershed. And when a city does that, what they're saying is, you know, our water is so valuable, we don't want it to be threatened by anything. And, you know, I think that's a really smart thing to do, because obviously with the different layers of government we've got going, the protection isn't happening. There's no monitoring going on, so we can't say what the impacts really are. And there's no comprehensive assessment where we're looking at the situation and saying, this is a tipping point and we can't go beyond this. That doesn't exist. They're just, the county's just permitting development in the watersheds ad infinitum. Like every permit that comes through, they figure out a way to make it comply with all the laws and regulations, and, you know, in goes the vineyard. So, yeah, and as somebody who lives out in the rural area, I really see this. I've seen the transformation of about 3,000 acres of Rector watershed in my lifetime, from a completely wild state to a very developed agricultural state. And it's definitely impacting that creek. The reservoir is filling up with sediment. It was offline for several months last year because of fine sediment clogging the filters, sand filters. And Yountville had to buy water from the city of Napa, which was like at least twice as expensive, I think. You know, and that's a catastrophe that could have been completely avoided if we had been planning better for our watersheds. So Rector is owned by the Veterans Affairs Office, and they sell water to Yountville. The city of Napa has Milliken and Con as water supplies, and both of those are under threat for development. There's another big project going in at the top of Milliken really soon. And, you know, a lot of people have fought really hard to stave off development in that watershed, but, you know, clearly it's coming. It's really unfortunate. And I know that in Napa, they're nervous about what might happen at Con. And so public sentiment asking for cities to, and voting for and funding cities to own their watersheds. And then also, as Kellie mentions, to change our general plan, to change the zoning, because especially at this point where they've already been developed to quite a degree, most of these watersheds, and we're not even monitoring. If we could at least change the zoning in the water supply watersheds to say the highest and best use of the land here is water, you know, and not ag, because if you make the highest and best use of the land ag there, you're going to ruin your water supply. And what have you got then? You know, a very bad situation. So, so those are a couple things people can do.
So who's approving? I mean, One thing I thought of is when someone's running for Board of Supervisors, don't each of those people get name someone to the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
So what are some questions like, can you, like candidate A, do you promise to put an environmental activist in the Planning Commission, or do you promise not to put in a developer or former developer or someone tied to the industry? Are there questions like that we can be asking candidates who are running? Would that make any difference?
You know,
Naive, I know.
I don't know. I think you really got to vet your candidates and look at where their money's coming from. You know, it tells you a lot. So I don't know. Kellie, do you want to?
Well, you know, I'll go out there and name names. A particular concern is that Alfredo Pedrosa has appointed Andrew Mazzotti, who works for one of the, or the biggest developer in Napa, that has proposed the big hotel on the Kohl's site, and that is the developer of that, I don't know what it's called, the mall down in Napa. It's clear to me as a wonk that watches Planning Commission and supervisors meetings that Mr. Mazzotti is unable to think critically about a project and that it might have negative impacts. He continues to say that hotels shouldn't be burdened for affordable housing, and is just not enough removed from his developer hat to make good decisions for the county. And
Okay, so it looks like we lost Kellie, and great points though. Did you have anything you wanted to add about the Planning Commission? I mean, other than
well, you know, your representatives really matter. So when you vote, do your research. And this is a relatively small community. If you reach out to somebody running for office, you know, I mean, having done that recently, I know it can be a very, very busy and demanding process for the candidate, but odds are they should have time to get back to you. And certainly people who are currently in elected roles should have time to talk to you. But Napa's just not, you know, population-wise, not that big. And you absolutely deserve the attention of your representatives, no matter who you are. So reach out to them and tell them what you're thinking and ask them questions. And just, you know, get involved, because this is it's Napa, you know, and I think about, I've worked on problems at the state level, and I lived in Sonoma County for quite a long time. During college, I was going to Sonoma State, and a lot of these places have such intractable problems. In Napa, the problems are so solvable. You know, it's, you know, and it's the only reason they're intractable is because the people in power don't want to work on fixing them, and that's really unfortunate, because there's so many great people in this community. We just deserve better. So get in there and ask questions and make a fuss and write those letters to the editor. All that stuff really matters. You know, talk to your friends about it. It's, you know, get political. This is our lives.
But I will say, I mean, when you have 3 minutes and supervisors look bored or clearly are waiting to go to their luncheon with a winery exec or whatever it is, whether that's fair or not, I'm willing to say that's not a fair assessment. You cannot get access to them. And I'm just particularly talking about Dylan and Wagon Connect. They literally will ignore an email, even though the way to contact them is through an email. They will ignore a phone call and never get back to you. It's like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. And if we're my last name, we're an old Italian family tied to wine, would I get a call back? I bet you I would. And it's really frustrating, is all I can say. But I also wanted to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. There are no heroes here, so we can't be waiting for the perfect candidate. And I know Pedrosa has a lot of problems, seemingly, but I will also say he's the one out front, like no one else, on the COVID. Like, he's out there with his community doing stuff. So I don't want to demonize anybody, and I don't want to hero worship anybody. They're very human people on the board of supervisors right now. I mean, superhuman. We don't really have strong leaders in that sense, or they haven't shown it to be. So,
and everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses, you know.
Yeah.
But having been in academia dealing with absent-minded and very busy professors for a long time, you know what? Don't take it personally when people don't get back to you. It's just be persistent. Send 5 emails, send 10 emails, like send emails till you get a response.
No, I take it. Sorry.
I know that. It's not you, it's them. You know, you deserve that attention. So
there's a consequence to it though. And it's me, an average guy who would really rather be cooking beans and traveling in Mexico. I'm going to spend my time outing what is going on with this Napa Citizen. Like, I'm a citizen. And listen, I've had a free ride for a long time. So, I mean, I should have been involved much sooner. And I hate to use the word woke, but I'm waking. So I'm like, yeah, better late than never, I guess. But it's I find it very frustrating.
Well, I guess I'm just saying, you know, I think our inner voices have so much to do with our emotional state and our feelings, and then that ends up affecting how we function in the world. And just make sure your inner voice is real positive.
Mm-hmm.
No. And you know, and when the world in any regard doesn't give you the response you were hoping for, you know, don't necessarily take it to mean you're anything's wrong with you, because a lot of times people are just on their own program, and they're just, you know, they're busy in their kitchen cooking their beans.
Yeah. No, it's true. And with this whole COVID thing, I've often said, because I've had some customers who were just at to lunch and other things, like, we're all trying our best. We're all making big mistakes, and we just got to cut each other a little bit of slack.
Yeah.
Except for the paid people who are supposed to be in charge. Those people, you need to call them to task, is what I would say.
Yeah, well, that's their job for sure. And I guess just what I'm saying is, know your candidates, know your issues, you know, and talk to people in the community, because you know, I don't necessarily feel like the local press does a great job of bringing issues to light. But we do have Eyes on Napa newsletter coming out through Vision 2050. Lake Berryessa has their own newsletter, and you know, you think what you might about the political slant that those might have, but they're addressing issues that aren't getting addressed otherwise, and that's why they're worth paying attention to.
Yeah,
so
totally agree.
Yeah. Anyway, well, it's been really fun to talk. Thank you.
And I just wanted to say, for people who might, like, if you are a vineyard lawyer and you want to just go at us, I mean, there's a comment section, and unless you're rude or disrespectful, I'm leaving it. And just be prepared. There's probably going to be someone answering it. So however it works for you, I would love a dialogue. And I would love someone to prove me wrong. It's like, no, it is actually better to raise forests to have nothing but wineries. Prove me wrong. I mean, I would love to hear that. Or that, you know, COVID's going to die on its own, and I'm going to show you why. And it's like, okay. But I'm not sold yet, but I'm willing to listen. And so I appreciate that. And we're going to try and do this more often. I'd love to have you back, and different activists, different people who are educated, and different people who are passionate about things in the Napa County that I don't feel like you say, aren't being covered. One newspaper with such a complex valley probably isn't enough, especially with budget cuts and advertising issues and everything like that. I don't need an advertiser. So I don't have to please an advertiser at all. So, all right. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Napa Citizen Round Table. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Coucou, les rosiers fleurissent. Coucou, les rameaux verdissent. Coucou, voici le printemps. Coucou, le beau soleil brille. Coucou, et les yeux des filles. Coucou, en font tout autant. Que faites-vous encore à sommeiller? Éveillez-vous, le monde est transformé. Coucou, ouvrez-moi bien vite. Coucou, mon cœur vous invite. Coucou, il faut nous aimer. mon amour. Ta-dia, dia, dia, ta-dia, ta-dia. Coucou veut dire bonjour. Que faites-vous encore à sommeiller? Éveillez-vous, le monde est transformé. Coucou, ouvrez-moi bien vite. Coucou, mon cœur vous invite. Coucou, il faut nous aimer.